All right. Happy Tuesday. We're here posting up right after, well, the day after the Eastern Conference Finals have ended, and we're looking at the Miami Heat versus the Denver Nuggets, which to start the year, I don't think a lot of people would have said. I think the Nuggets were pretty low on a lot of people's lists and analysts' lists. The Miami Heat were put on the back burner behind at the start of the season. You were looking at Philly, Milwaukee, Boston, at that time, the Nets. They were put behind all of that. And now they're representing the Eastern Conference in the finals after absolutely dominating the Celtics in a 7-game series. It's kind of weird to say dominating in a 7-game series, but when you go up 3-0 and then you crush that same team in game 7 by 19 points, it's a pretty dominant win. So what happened in that game 7, right? Boston goes down 0-3 in the series. They come back. They have a brilliant game 4 after going down 0-3. The Miami Heat struggled in game 5, and then the Celtics steal game 6 with a 0.1 second Derek White putback. Emotionally draining, a lot of tension for the Celtics kind of being pulled off their bodies. You could see their body language in all of those post-game interviews, just like hands in the face, just like, like, wow. You know, big breaths of fresh air. And for what? For what? They go to game 7 and they fall completely flat. The very first play of the game, Jason Tatum turns his ankle on a blocking foul by Gabe Vincent. When he goes up on the second attempt, he just falls down, ankle buckles on Vincent's leg, and he was never the same after that. And this is kind of like the frustration I've had with the media for years now. We vault these players into superstar categories. We start comparing them to all-time greats. We start pushing them into that upper echelon caliber player. And I think Tatum belongs there. Very, very good player. But then he deserves to be critiqued as such. What he did in game 7, despite being hurt, was horrible. He went out there and was shying away from possessions. He went out there and whenever Jaylen Brown tried to give him the ball to bring it up the court, tapped it right back and spotted up for 3 on the corner. He relegated himself to being JJ Redick. He relegated, and worse, because he didn't even move off the ball. Pulled himself from being one of the top 5 players to just being Evan Fournier, to being Jason Capono. That's not what the Celtics needed. And it turns out they needed a lot more from him, as he gave him, I believe it was just 14 points. Just an abysmal showcase. And he completely skirted all blame. All of it. Got none in the media today, which, you know, bothers me a lot being a basketball fan. He had 14 points, 11 rebounds to his credit. It's pretty good. 4 assists in 42 minutes of action, going 5 of 13 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3, 3 of 4 from free. Not what you expect when it comes to superstar production. This is the guy who, I know he had a shoulder injury, but also was the reason why Boston lost in the finals last year. He did not show up. He couldn't make a shot if it was within the 3-point line. And he did the same thing again this year, completely blowing up this game 7. I know Jaylen Brown's the one that's getting all the criticism right now because he tried, and I will say a lot of bad possessions, which at this point I feel like we've come to expect from the Boston Celtics throughout the course of the postseason. A lot of ill-advised 3-point shots. They were really frustrating to watch. You look at that team, you see how talented they are. Al Horford, really talented center. Robert Williams, really talented center. Marcus Smart, do-it-all point guard. Defensive ace. Derek White, the only Celtic to really show up. Really good point guard. Malcolm Brogdon, playing with a torn elbow, but played. Jaylen Brown, one of the most talented 2 guards, second-team All-NBA. And Jason Tatum, multi-time first-team All-NBA. I know he's only 25, but he's been in the league for long enough now where you got to get over that hump. I know he's still young, he still has opportunities, but when you play like that, that's bad. And you can go into the injury thing, right? Tweaked his ankle early in the first quarter, the very first possession of the game. How many other players in this postseason alone played on messed up ankles? Jimmy Butler got drop kicked in the ankle by Josh Hart. Played the rest of the game on it. Played the rest of the series on it when his ankle blew up to the size of a bowling ball. Jalen Brunson played the Heat series with a messed up ankle and played hard. Did not skirt a single possession. Went out there and balled out every single play. LeBron James playing on a mysterious foot injury. We still don't know what kind of tendon tear or whatever it may be, but played on that. Every time he tweaked his ankle, you know what he did? He tied up his shoes, put it exceptionally tight, and then went out there and kept playing. We watched Tatum shy away from possession after possession after possession. Just standing there, relegating himself to a 3-point shooter, a spot-up 3-point shooter, and he gets no blame? I don't know. That to me is crazy. That's insane. I do think he deserves a lot of credit for being a sensational baller through games 4, 5, and 6. You know, he was great. But at game 7, he was horrible. And he kind of milked it. He had no burst. There were plenty of possessions where you see him skate past his opponent, catching fast break layups. And he bricked a layup, I believe. I'm pretty sure he put too much butter on that and just rolled out. But it's kind of, he deserves some blame there. It's not all on Jaylen Brown. How many other like superhero injured performances happened? I remember a game back in like 2009. Ben Wallace played on a fractured leg for a quarter. He had a fracture. Oh no, it's just a calf strain. He literally fractured his leg, and he played a quarter on that. Isaiah Thomas, one of the most famous instances of an ankle injury, and you could see the heart. 25 points in that quarter, 42 for the game, where he's hobbling every step, aching, pain, balled out. This is a game 7. This is game 7. You're right there. You're on the cusp of making the finals again. And you would have had home court advantage. Just a really shameful performance by Jason Tatum. But let's go to what, did happen. Miami Heat came to play. You would think they would be demoralized after what happened in game 6. Right? That's a heartbreaking defeat. You come back, you scratch your claw your way back into that game after being down double digits. I think it was a 9-point lead or deficit in this case with 3 minutes to go. Come back, take that 1-point lead on some really good made free throws, and you lose at the buzzer with 0.1 seconds. That's tough. But they came out and they balled. Caleb Martin, sensational. For the series, he averaged 19.6 boards, 2 assists on 60% from the field, 49 from 3, and 87 from free. Caleb Martin was balling out. He was a 1 vote away from being conference finals MVP. And that's with Bam's struggles. Bam was horrible for multiple games down the stretch of this series. He couldn't buy a bucket. All those little bunny hook shots, all those little mid-range jumpers, bad decision-making. He just didn't feel comfortable in the role of being an offensive fulcrum, and you could just see it. He was second-guessing opportunities. I think there was a play where he catches the post right there on the elbow of the free throw line, and Marcus Smart tries to bait an offensive foul, falls down. You're wide open for that shot. You could have taken an extra step for a floater, and instead he pivots, he looks, and then he throws up some bullshit. And he missed. Just bad possessions from Bam. But the Heat role players came to play. Namely Caleb Martin. Jimmy Butler. This whole series, a lot of ups and downs. Came out. He went 12 for 28 from the field. Not particularly good shooting, but 28.7 boards, 6 assists, 3 steals. And he played some incredible defense on Jaylen Brown, completely demoralizing him. How many times is he going to poke the ball from behind your handles? If Jaylen Brown's not setting up cone drills consistently throughout the entire offseason, he fails to understand exactly what went wrong here. This is 2 years now that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have been horrific when it comes to handling the ball under direct ball pressuring defense. So there's a lot to work on from them, but really good job by Jimmy Butler. I do want to talk a little bit more about JB. As phenomenal as he is, I feel like the moniker for playoff Jimmy's a little bit overstated. So I'm going to give you a quick blind stat here. 2 players from the postseason this year. Player number 1 is averaging 28.5 points, 7 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 2.1 steals, shooting 48, 36, and 80, right? So 48 field, 36 3, and 80 from the free throw line. Player 2 is averaging 27.7, 5.5 boards, 6.1 assists, 1.7 steals, 48, 40, and 92.5. Those stats are incredibly similar. Really just like right down the line. Very, very similar. One guy is touted right now as a top 3 player in the NBA. Arguably, could be one of the best, if not the best, in the league right now. And that's the credit he's getting. The other guy not even in the conversation for best player A or player one is Jimmy Butler. Player two is Jamal Murray. Yeah. So those stats are very, very similar, right down the line, man. But one guy is being touted as a top 3 player in the NBA, and the other guy is not even an all-star. People aren't giving him that consideration. I think he deserves to be. I think right now he's probably the 3rd best point guard in the league. Probably 2nd. I'll put him right up there with like the Damian Lillards and Stephen Currys of the world. Is he better than them? Probably better than Dame at this point right now, but not better than Steph. Even so, balling out, not getting the credit he deserves. You know, maybe it's a little just annoyance at, you know, the playoff Jimmy thing. If he has the weirdest basketball reference page I've ever seen. If you go through it, you'll see some incredible all-time great performances. You look at basketball references thing called Game Score, and he has some amazing ones, some of the best ever in history. And then he has some really bad ones, and it'll be in the same series. So, you know, I can go over some of them with you, but it's kind of weird. In this series alone, the last game, 28-7-6, really good game. Let's go back to game 5, 14-5-5. The game before that, game 6, he was a pivotal reason why they lost, shooting 5 for 21 from the field, 24-11-8. And I know he was initiating the offense, and what he does on the defensive end cannot be understated. I do think he is right now probably a top 5 player. I do like to include the regular season, so that's why I'll probably put him at the back end of top 10 right now, because regular season does matter. You know, seeding matters and all that, but I understand people that don't want to do that. Hey, you go a little further. Game 3. He didn't play particularly well, but they won. You know, 16.6 assists, 8 boards, shooting 38% from the field. Obviously dominated the Bucks, killed them. That's series like that and games like that and stretches like that is where this nickname comes from. But then let's go back to the Knicks series, right? The Knicks series wasn't nearly as dominant. You know, he obviously missed game 1, but he shot really poorly, especially in the game 6 that they ended up winning anyway. 7 for 22 from the field, 8 boards, 4 assists, and really could not stop Jalen Brunson. So it's just one of those things where it kind of gets a little overstated. I know we get lost in the hype, but there are bad games that you don't typically see from some of these all-time great players. And we're thrusting him in that conversation just because, you know, we'll see one of these crazy performances, right? Just absolutely outlandish performance. I'm going to go out there and give you 56 tonight, right? Set a playoff record. And then you look back and you're like, oh, well, you know, the day before that or a couple games before that, he had, you know, 6 points. It's just weird. It's really bizarre. So let me go back to my previous notes. You know, against the Celtics, bad game 3, bad game 5, bad game 6. Almost lost out on conference MVP if it wasn't for Tim Bontemps changing his vote. Or Reggie Miller, actually, who was rooting for Caleb Martin the entire time and then, you know, just actually voted for Jimmy Butler. You know, just it wasn't a man of his word. He was not that good against the Knicks, even though he was awesome against the Bucks. Last year, he had bad game 3, 4, and 5 against the Celtics. I have the numbers here. Game 3, he had 8 points on 3 of 8. Game 4, he had 6 points on 3 of 14. Game 5, he had 13 points on 4 of 18. And then game 6, obviously, he was awesome with 47. And then game 7, which they lost, he was pretty good with 35 and 9 with 1 assist. And then obviously that missed 3-pointer at the end of the game. Not holding that against him. Just really weird, man. Like I'm telling you, like it'll be some of the most incredible performances, and then in the middle will just be like a really bad one. We can go even back further than that. He was solid against Philly last year. He was great in games 2 and 4 versus Atlanta the first round last year, but he was okay, like mid in games 1 and 3. He was horrible against the Bucks in 2021. In 2020, I think this is when the playoff Jimmy thing really started being born. He was amazing in game 3 against LA and game 5 against LA, but he was horrible in game 6. So, and he was kind of mid against Boston that series, going into the finals of 2020. And I believe it was Bam who was the focus, the focal point that really propelled the Heat in that series. Just want to point that out. You know, the playoff Jimmy thing can be a little annoying to me just because we only focus on the really good performances, and then when the bad ones happen, it's like, oh, no, it's just Jimmy Butler. Like, no, you want to hold him to that standard, be consistent. Same thing with Tatum. I was crapping on Tatum all day yesterday because of how poorly he played in that game, despite the injury. Unless he tore something in his ankle, there was no reason to play that tentatively. Butler gets the conference finals MVP. I think he deserved it. I know there was an argument for Caleb Martin, but Caleb Martin doesn't get those looks without Jimmy Butler being that much of a focus defensively for Boston. How many times did he set him up? Jimmy Butler handling the ball, being the offensive initiator repeatedly, caused people like Jaylen Brown to kind of cheat off of his man a little bit. Jason Tatum cheating off of his man a little bit, trying to poke and prod at Butler's handles as he gets into the paint. And then Caleb Martin gets lost in the defensive focus. And then he had an open opportunity after open opportunity, was able to force closeouts and then, attack that closeout to get nice little mid-rangers or attacking the basket. A lot of what Martin was able to do, and credit him for doing it. He did it phenomenally, was probably the second best player in that series. I believe he thoroughly outplayed Jaylen Brown. I believe he thoroughly outplayed Jason Tatum. And because of that, he was garnering a lot of attention when it came to the media for the vote. But does that happen without Jimmy Butler being that offensive fulcrum, right? Probably not. So totally get it. You have Boston's future coming up as well. Obviously, a lot of questions have to be answered. Jaylen Brown is up on the opportunity to be re-signed. Do they take him back? I know Jason Tatum wants him back, but 5 years, $295 million is a lot of money. And with the new cap rules, you're going to really hamstring your situation. But granted, there's going to be a lot more max contracts out there. So max for max, your problem, my problem. We'll see what happens down the line. Still, really, really a lot of questions to answer out there in Boston. The biggest question I think they have to answer is coaching. Their coaching situation is horrible. They have a couple different lanes they can go. They can go for a coach like Frank Vogel. Maybe they go for, Monty Williams. They can pick up someone that I think should have a job at this point, and Mark Jackson, a really futuristic type coach, help push this team in the right direction, give them some kind of an identity. Or you can stick with Mazzulla and then just fill up that bench. Like the brain drain that happened in Boston was real, and they set Mazzulla up to fail. You didn't just lose Udoka 2 days before the regular season started, right? Udoka obviously had that scandal, and you threw Mazzulla in. You also lost Will Hardy to the Utah Jazz, who would have been their second coach, the backup guy, the very first person on the bench. And you lost Damon Stoudemire to a college. That's a lot of people to lose. The brain drain really happened, and then you didn't replace him. So you kind of just left him on an island to sit with other, assistant coaches, the 4th and 5th best coaches on the team. It's not exactly an ideal situation. So what do? You go out there and you get assistants, the best assistants you can find. I saw a name floated out there a couple hours ago, Sam Cassell. Obviously, he could be a head coach in this league, but that will be a really good assistant. You go out there, you try to find any former player. Maybe you look at the Miami Heat bench. How many people have been poaching Greg Popovich's bench for like a decade now? Maybe it's time to start going into that Eric Spoelstra tree. See what you can find there. I think that is probably the biggest course of action if they retain the team. Obviously, this team is insanely talented. They got to start working on cone drills. They got to start working on how to break a zone. Watching Boston play was incredibly infuriating. I'm not a player. I'm not a coach. I haven't played on any level outside of park recreational ball, but I love the game. And watching them go left to right on the three-point line, just passing the ball left to right along the three-point line, was just infuriating to watch. I know Charles Barkley echoed my sentiment, and my brother texted me immediately afterwards and was like, yo, Charles Barkley just said the same thing you've been saying. And I was like, dude, because they're annoying to watch. Like, as talented as that team is, they should not be playing this poorly. Regardless, Miami Heat had a phenomenal game plan, and they executed it to perfection. They made Boston play into their worst habits, and they lost. So congrats to Miami for making the finals. Second 8th seed of all time making the finals. The other one was the New York Knicks in 99, also not really an 8th seed, the same way this Heat team's not really an 8th seed. And now we have a Denver-Miami finals. Denver won 6 in a row against this Heat team and 9 of the last 10 regular season meetings. The Heat defense is going to have to really find a way to buckle down on this Nuggets offense. I think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great series to watch. These are the two top 3-point shooting teams in the postseason. They literally are number 1 and 2. Denver is the number 2 offense so far in this postseason. The Heat are coming off 7 games, and the Nuggets are coming off of a lot of rest. I think they've had 10 days off. So this is going to be the epitome of rest versus rust. The Heat didn't look that tired going down the stretch of Game 7, so I don't expect it to be too much of an issue. Miami is also incredibly famous for their conditioning. That was one of the first things we ever saw when it came to the Heatles. They got in that gym and they, run. We got to get our stamina up. So pretty cool. The Heat zone, I don't think is going to work too much against Denver. Jason Timpf posted a stat on Twitter. Denver played against that Heat zone for 12 possessions and they scored 20 points. That's a lot. That's like 1.4 points per possession. Pretty crazy. For the Heat, one of the biggest things coming from them is that Tyler Hero might be coming back potentially for Game 3 is what I've seen. How is his insertion into their lineup going to change their dynamic? I feel like a lot of what they've built here is role player identity. Their players knowing exactly what they are and knowing exactly where they got to be and playing their roles to perfection, both on the defensive and offensive ends. Caleb Martin getting a lot of secondary opportunities that he wouldn't get otherwise if Tyler Hero was there. Jimmy Butler is a much more willing and a better passer and is going to find you. Tyler Hero is more of a bailout passer, although he has improved over the last couple of seasons. But you're also going to get the offensive initiation. But he's also rusty. He hasn't played in almost 2 months. So, how good is he going to be when he comes in? It's going to be weird, watching them potentially break their rotations. I know I've been a fan of Highsmith over the course of this postseason run. I like how hard he plays. I like how aggressively he plays. And I like that he kind of puts himself in the right spots consistently. So, is he going to lose those minutes? He was pivotal in that Game 7. He was huge in Game 5. I really like what I've seen from Highsmith. But if Hero comes back, losing a lot of minutes there. You're losing a lot of offensive creation opportunities from Gabe Vincent, who's been awesome in this whole postseason run. Kyle Lowry may not get as many minutes, who's been pivotal on the defensive side of things, especially early in the series against the Knicks. So, it gives them more looks, but it also takes away some of their flexibility and versatility that we've seen, as well as it kind of, I don't want to say, it's not simplified, but it kind of makes their offense a little bit more, I guess, complicated. I don't know. It's gonna be a weird dynamic. But a big one for this series is going to be the Jokic versus Bam matchup. Jokic, I think, is going to barbecue Zeller or Kevin Love. There's no way around it. Jokic he doesn't look like it, but he's deceptively quick. And Zeller and Love just aren't, good enough defenders to really stay with him, especially with how much he does on the offensive side of things. You can't double him. He's going to find the open man. You can't dribble him. He's going to find either open man. And they have a really good motion offense. So the only player I think that you can put on him is Bam. I think he could probably hold his own. Jokic is still probably going to shoot 50%, have 10 assists or more with less than 3 turnovers, or less than 4 turnovers, I should say. The next matchup, you got Murray versus Butler. Who's going to win that matchup? I think Butler's going to be a great defender on him, but will he lose his legs? Butler has been prone to being tired at the end of really, really tight games. And Murray has had a second wind every single night. Not to mention the altitude. We saw the altitude completely destroy the Lakers. Is that going to be a factor against the Heat? I think their role players can keep up with the motor, but Butler has been prone to having dead legs at the end of series. Now, he just came off of 7. He has been relatively healthy outside of the ankle injury in the Knicks series. Can he maintain it for 48 minutes playing against Jamal Murray, where he's probably going to be the primary defender on him? It's going to be an interesting matchup to see. On the flip side of it, Butler's going to hunt Murray over and over again. We saw LeBron James do it. I think Butler's going to follow a similar example, get him on the post, put him on his back, and get to work, because you're going to have to send help. And it's going to come down to the Heat shooters. Are they going to be able to maintain that 3-point shooting pace? they've been a little weird. They have been up and down when it comes to shooting. They're 40% from three in wins, 36% from three in losses. And that 36% includes the incredible shooting they had in game 5 and 6, where they shot 39 and 48% respectively against the Celtics. So typically they don't shoot that well in losses from three. And in those losses, they have a point differential of negative 10.5. So typically those losses are blowouts. They're not like close losses. They are prone more so to like cold stretches than Denver is. Denver, they shoot 40% in wins and they shoot 33% in losses, but those losses are decided by 6 points or less. So they tend to have really, really tight games, even if they're not shooting well from deep, because even though they can drill and they have some snipers on their team, they're not really reliant on the three ball the way we saw, the Celtics be. So really something to look out for. That 3-point shooting is going to be really important and pivotal for Miami in this series. Another important matchup, now that we have defined Alfred in Miami and Caleb Martin versus Michael Porter Jr. It's going to be a huge matchup. Porter Jr. is 14-8. I went over Martin's stats in the conference finals. It was 19-6-2 on 60, 49, and 87. So I don't think those stats are sustainable, though that was a torrid pace that he was able to play with, and I don't think the Nuggets are as disorganized or lack the communication that we've seen Boston lack. So I expect those numbers to come back down to earth a little bit, but that's going to be a really interesting matchup. Porter Jr. is 6'10", complete mismatch. What are they going to do to defend him? He moves without the ball. He can put you on the post. And if you put a hand in his face, he's just going to elevate over you because he's 6'10". So a lot of questions to answer for Miami. The others in this series, outside of the stars, outside of Butler and Bam, outside of Murray and Jokic, the others are going to be what defines this series. We saw what Aaron Gordon did in game 4 against the Lakers. That 20-plus point performance. I think it was like 22 points. But he was dominant. But it was because of, moving without the ball, being aggressive when he got his opportunities, attacking closeouts, and getting putbacks or rim running opportunities from the dunker slot. And we're going to see a lot of that, especially if Bam is pulled free throw line extended to defend Jokic. I still think Jokic is going to get his. I know there's a lot of that conversation of, show me, right? Like, I got to see what you do in these moments. And the only player we've really seen perform incredibly well in a finals was Jimmy Butler, and even he wasn't that good. So a lot of these guys are going to be in this for the first time. I expect the Nuggets to kind of maintain their pacing, though. They just play really good basketball. It's not going to be the same coaching mismatch that we saw against the Celtics here with Spo versus Michael Malone. I think Denver gets this series in 6. I do got to see game 1, though. I got to see what they do with Jokic. Got to see what Denver's game plan is. They've made solid adjustments against the Lakers, and they don't have to change their personnel to do it, which is kind of the most impressive part about it. Typically, when you have a deep roster, you got to change your personnel and your lineups to accommodate what's going on. We just saw it with the Celtics series in the Heat. Kevin Love got played off the floor, so we saw Haywood Highsmith get a lot more minutes. So the Nuggets don't really do that. They have their 7-man rotation, and then they just find better places to plug and play. We watched their bench get a little bit better. Jokic is probably the best offensive engine in the game with a perfect complementary player alongside him in Jamal Murray. What weaknesses is Spo really going to attack? I think it's going to be putting Butler on the post against Murray to try to exploit that mismatch as much as possible. And they got to win those minutes when Jokic is off the court. The hardest part, though, is KCP's been pretty good keeping those 2-minute stretches tight. So they're going to have to find a way to really buckle down in those minutes and try to build any kind of a lead. It's going to be a great series, though. I'm excited for it. I hope you are, too. That's going to do it for this Nuggies for Champions. I got them winning it in 6. I know some people think it's going to be 5. I've heard sweep, but I can't count the Heat out. They play too hard. I think they're going to be able to run around with the Nuggets on the offensive side of things, like defending them. I mean, what we saw with the Lakers, they just got tired. Down the stretch of a game, they just didn't have the legs to maintain. I don't think the Heat are going to get tired. They got the horses to run. They got probably the best personnel to do it. They know how to close out. They do it properly. They do it all the time. And I expect to continue to see that. But thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. And I'll catch you next time.